This podcast episode is sponsored by Geekdom, San Antonio's entrepreneurship hotspot and co-working space. Whether you need one-time recurring office space or event space, Geekdom has it all. Use code SOCIALBUTTERFLY when signing up for a membership to receive $25 off of monthly memberships. Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high-achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best-kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award-winning leadership and visibility coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. We are celebrating all things 1-year anniversary of Unapologetically Visible on the podcast for the next couple of episodes. Last episode, I dove into how the technology almost made me hesitant about starting and launching a podcast and went into processes and systems to better help you make the decision about starting a podcast. And if it's something that you have been feeling too around letting the technology stop you, it was sort of my gift to you to sort of give you permission to go ahead and launch it and to do it messy and to do it afraid, just to do it. And today I am going to be really diving into what has surprised me the most around the term visibility when it comes to launching a podcast. I feel as a visibility coach, someone that is really working to better enhance and 10x the visibility of my clients. That word you hear constantly in the internet and the online creator space about more visibility or just better visibility. So many business owners want that. And I feel like my podcast has really opened my eyes around what visibility truly means for me in this medium, and some things that totally surprised me about the 1 year of consistently doing episodes, even at a time where I wasn't physically able to record them. So today I'm going to really dive into what has surprised me the most about launching a podcast and thinking about my visibility from a different lens, and what you could probably learn about your own visibility when you start diving into different mediums and different formats of visibility for your brand and your business. So I feel like the term visibility always gets tossed around so many times now in the online space. Even my clients that come to me because of the visibility, they are looking for opportunities for them to build trust, to build connection, to form this bond with others through the screen. And I feel like one of the things that my podcast really has allowed for me to do in a way that social media never allowed for me to do is it has made me feel way more comfortable around storytelling and going deep in a way that I normally wouldn't in social media. I've been fighting sort of this push and pull when it comes to the way I'm viewing my social media content nowadays. And I feel like I started to really think of it very differently the moment that I launched my podcast. And I would say that is something that has surprised me the most about diving in and becoming a podcaster is I never thought that my relationship with content creation would shift and change and pivot in the ways that podcasting has allowed for me to do. I always saw my social media as a way for me to market my expertise and my knowledge and my skills, really becoming that authority figure. And I've said this in previous episodes recently around how we're not seeing that anymore in today's world of social media. People that are coming on to social media and that are creating content at a fast rate are not looking to have authority figures come across their screen. They're really wanting to build a genuine connection, which is a very interesting way of building connection because you're doing it all from a screen. And I feel like one of the things that really surprised me the most about launching this podcast is that relationship with my own social media. I feel way more comfortable talking here on the podcast because it is a longer format. I feel like I am as authentic as I can be when it comes to talking to you. I think one of my favorite things about doing this podcast, but more so as a solo podcast, is it allows for me to really dive deep into some certain topics that a 60 to 90-second reel or TikTok video wouldn't allow me to do in the first place. And so what has surprised me the most is just how I'm thinking differently about my own visibility. What does that mean for me to the people that have known me for the longest time, if they've been supporters of the Social Butterfly Gal since the very beginning? Or what does that relationship mean to you who are just discovering me? And how can I really utilize this podcast to not only build know, like, trust, but to also form that authentic and genuine connection with you in a audio format? I always was so enamored around just radio and television. I mean, that essentially was my degree. And I think when I look back at the work that I was doing in college, where I worked at the radio station and I was creating my own public access TV show, all of those bits and pieces and those elements have always stuck with me at my core. And so I think the thing that really surprised me the most is what the goal of this podcast is in relationship to the goals that I have for my social media and the goals that I have for my business. And I feel like the podcast has just allowed me to really see all different layers of me. And I'm really trying to better understand the topics that you want to hear, or just thinking about lived experiences as a business owner, an entrepreneur, a Latina leader, somebody who is navigating life at the same time of like building this business, and what it truly means to be unapologetically visible at a time where our visibility is being questioned, especially as Latinas, is really crucial. So that's the first thing that totally surprised me about my podcast is I didn't realize that it would make me shift and look at my relationship with social media in a very different way. But I'm so glad that it has. I think another thing that has surprised me the most is the role that AI is now playing in our everyday life, but also as a creator, as somebody who's a writer. I try my best to understand how to use AI in the podcast creation of the episodes in a way that doesn't stifle my creativity or make me sound like a robot. And I think the one thing that has surprised me the most, and it's kind of funny when you think about it, but I feel like the best episodes that I've had on this podcast are always when I go a little off script. Now, I do have a script. I write a script every Monday. I have bullet points that allow for me to know how to create a framework that gets the point across for these episodes. But in more recent times, I have been working so hard to let down my guard a little bit when it comes to riffing and just speaking from my heart. Obviously, you want structure. And I think that's the whole goal of the AI, is to have specific prompts that are going to naturally get you to create episodes at a very fast pace. It allows for more creative expression, or just the ability to create a script and then have AI finesse it. But I think one thing that has surprised me the most is how much I caught myself whenever the script was sort of turning into very AI dominant. And you can tell. I mean, I think it's really interesting when I listen to podcasts, especially from my favorite podcasters, you can tell when they are using a script that was written by AI, and you can tell when they're very, very genuine. And I have even caught myself where I have noticed like, hey, this script just is so repetitive. It's sounding very, very AI robot, and I don't talk like that. And so I've been challenging myself a little bit more to not have a script or to just have some bullet points, and me being able to, riff a little bit and to go to this podcast with the intention of, I want to be sitting, I want delete, and to go into almost every single episode with an intentionality of, I just want it to feel like we are grabbing a cup of coffee and we're sitting down in your living room couch with a fire, and we're just getting into a very in-depth, deep, raw conversation. Those are the type of conversations that I like. I'm not a surface level girly. And sometimes I feel like AI does very surface level writing and surface level work. And so my intentionality with almost every single episode is to have that one person in mind that I'm having coffee with. We're sitting down in your living room. We're drinking that cup of coffee and we're just having a really juicy, meaty, raw conversation that could literally last close to 3 to 4 hours. And it feels like no time has passed. So I think one thing that really has surprised me the most about just script writing is to continue to lean on my instincts and continue to lean on my lived experience. And while I'm so grateful that we have AI tools to be able to help us with the prompt and the framework and the script, I think it's still very important to not let that cloud the way that you want to present every single episode. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast in the next couple of weeks or months, I want to challenge you to go beyond that surface level AI bullshit and really think about how your own lived experience, your personality, your work ethic, your experiences and your knowledge and skills, how that can transcend across the medium. And what is that intention that you have for that? Because I think the one thing that totally surprised me the most is when I go off the cusp of that script, that's when I get the best feedback from all of you. And so I think it's just also me trusting in my instincts and knowing that I have a story to tell and it's a story worth telling. I think another thing that has surprised me the most about my own visibility when it comes to this podcast is really how unapologetic I am towards the storytelling and towards the ability to let my guard down, if you will. I am a very private person, or at least the older I've gotten, the more private I have become on social media. I think if you were to look back at some of my Facebook posts or my Instagram posts from a couple of years ago, I was always sharing so many things, always updating my Facebook at a really quick rate. And I feel like through age and through the years, you realize how important it is to just keep things to yourself. But I think one thing that has surprised me the most about the podcast is just how confident I feel letting down my guard and being unapologetic in a way where I feel it's okay to admit certain things out loud. And I know it's something that you might be feeling too, and it's worth sharing. And it's so interesting, again, going back to the relationship that I have with my own social media and my visibility as an authority figure and just a thought leader. I feel like this podcast, it really truly allows for me to be as unapologetic as I can because I feel so connected to you. I feel so connected to be able to just be so raw and have no filter, if you will. My business coach gave me a bracelet 2 years ago that said 0 fucks. And that's how I sort of live my life. But I feel like with social media, there's still this gnawing of like, you have to portray this perfect presence. You have to portray somebody that is not going to rock the boat or say the things out loud. And I think this podcast has totally given me permission to be unapologetic in all of my ways. And I don't want to say that I'm not as authentic and genuine as I am on social media, but I do feel like there's a hesitation of getting there in the way that this podcast allows me to, as well as when you're sitting down with me face to face and actually forming a genuine relationship with me. And I think that that has just surprised me in how I utilize every platform, every channel, every medium of my visibility, because one platform is not going to get the same Christina. And at first, I would always question that. I would always be like, well, why not? Like, I'm the same person throughout the in-person stuff, throughout the online stuff. I'm the same person on Instagram as I am on Facebook. And now as I got older, I feel like that's not really true anymore. Like, there are some things that I feel are more precious in guarding and sharing. And the way I can be unapologetic, I found confidence in that through building a podcast. And I feel like as a coach and as a leader, as a business owner, as all the identities that I have, I think that really surprised me was just the peeling of the onion of Christina and the layers that she has. She's so multifaceted. She is so gifted and talented. And I never would have seen that other side of me had I not launched this podcast and had I not given a reason to be able to let down my guard and to have those moments with you who are listening to me. And I feel like the last thing that really surprised me about my own visibility was the reach that this podcast would give me. I have built a really great reputation in San Antonio of my own brand and my visibility for the last 11 years. I started to expand that visibility from the pandemic when I started to invest in outside sources that weren't San Antonio based. But I feel like this podcast really just allowed for me to expand internationally. Whenever I look at the analytics, especially for the first couple months and now a whole year, I am genuinely shocked and so surprised at the reach that this podcast has given me. I have been able to reach you in very different countries than just the United States. And I think what's so beautiful is to see people that in different countries listen to this podcast. And anytime I go and I check, the different cities and the different states and the different countries, it blows my mind at how much you care about these episodes, how much you care about tuning in and downloading and providing your own perspective through messaging me on social media about the episode or giving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or on YouTube. And it just surprises me so much, because one of the reasons why I didn't also want to start a podcast was, yes, the technology, but there was sort of that little fear or that little voice inside my head that said, I don't think people would want to listen. So why am I going to start this? And then as time passed, it became very, very clear that I needed an outlet, that I needed something that was just going to provide for me to talk, because I love talking. I love having those conversations with so many people. I get lit up. I get jazzed. I feel so alive when I'm just talking. And I always felt like, well, why am I going to start something? Like, no one's going to listen to it. And I think one of the things that really has surprised me the most is to see your love, is to see your care. And anytime I open up the analytics and the downloads and to see who is listening, it just surprises me to know that there are people like you in different countries, not even in the same vicinity in San Antonio, Texas, that are listening to this, that are getting some type of value from the things that I say, the clients that I serve, the live experience. And it just makes me feel so full of gratitude, because I feel like in the last year since I started this podcast, I have been going through heavy shit, and you would never know unless you know me personally, unless you are a part of my life, or unless you listen to this podcast. I have been very vocal about the financial hardships that myself and Pete have undergone in the last 3 years and just the hardships that I've had in my own business journey, especially in the 10th year in business, I have been extremely vocal about the identity crisis that I'm feeling right now and the struggles of my fertility and thinking about motherhood and what that's going to look like. And I don't think I would have been able to share that if it wasn't for this podcast. I feel like this podcast has allowed for me to just really get things off of my mind, not so much like therapy, because I do have therapists and I do a lot of like therapy modalities, but I think it just reminds me and puts back into perspective how lonely we can be and how many of us are just striving for that connectivity. We're wanting that humanness. We want other people to feel like we can be seen, heard, and understood, and to see the reach, to see that this podcast that I was so hesitant on starting, to see that it has reached many of you is such a beautiful gift. And so I want to encourage you today, if you're thinking about launching a podcast, if you're thinking about, are people going to listen? Should I do this? I want to encourage you and say, yes, your voice is such a gift. Your story is your superpower. And even if you have one person, you are making a difference. And that's all I feel that I think about anytime I create episodes is you. I think about you, that one person that might be listening who is struggling or just needs a friend who needs permission to be unapologetically visible. I want to thank you again. Next week is 1 year of the podcast. I'm going to cry. And so again, next week, we're going to have this big celebration here on the podcast. And I just want to encourage you today that your story is your superpower and that your voice can transcend many different languages and many different countries. And your voice is so special. Never, ever, ever forget that. Thank you for tuning in to episode 52. Next week is officially 1 year on the podcast, and I can't wait to celebrate with you. And if you have ever felt like this podcast has impacted you, please reach out and DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal so we can just chat a little bit and you can just share with me some of the episodes that you have felt have really impacted you. Great time. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is thinking about starting a podcast. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe, your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I will personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.